name is Adam Szymczyk and I'm the artistic director of Documenta 14. Welcome. This is the Parliament of Bodies, meaning that you are the Parliament of Bodies. This is not a presentation of a Parliament of Bodies, but this is the Parliament of Bodies being constituted here by your presence, which is different to any parliament that is constituted through the process of elections and such, and which is based on idea of political representation. So we don't represent, we are present. Right? Correct. Hopefully, thank you. Why Parliament of Bodies here in the Museum Fridericianum? This is a little quiz from the history of Kassel and its environs. Actually, there was a parliament here once. This parliament was the one of the short-lived kingdom of Westphalia under Jérôme Bonaparte in the beginning of the 19th century. And this very space, which always made me wonder, why did they add this sort of apsis to otherwise very regular building? So this was the space of the parliament, I think, at some point, or proto-parliament of sorts. At some point we might be looking even at the architectural drawings that show the exact arrangement of the parliament of the Kingdom of Westphalia around 1810 here in this space. So this is a very different one, and this is the one which was initiated in Athens in a very different space in September last year. So, the Parliament of Bodies initiated in Athens as part of Documenta 14 in September 2016 was in a very different space, I would say in an entirely different space, namely in the building of the former military barracks that were built in the 19th century in the center of the city of Athens. And then these military barracks were taken over during the period of military junta in Greece, 1967-1974, and became a place from which the secret police would extend their operations, and also the place where actually the various members of the political oppositions were detained, interrogated, tortured, and so forth. So after the junta, those barracks changed function quite dramatically. One of them became a museum dedicated to a prominent Greek politician in the 20th century, Eleftherios Venizelos. And another one, and the one exactly in which our Parliament of Bodies started its proceedings, was transformed into a municipal gallery, so a kind of white cube type of space in which an architect, a Greek architect and artist, Andreas Angelidakis, proposed to create a modular and mobile architecture of blocks, very similar to the ones that you're sitting on now, but covered with a very different skin. And that skin was basically an image of raw concrete. So we had sort of light concrete blocks out of which we could build changing architectures for different events that took place during the 34 exercises of freedom. That was the initial series of events of the Parliament of Bodies in Athens. And then the same architecture served in various configurations to all subsequent events that were many. And now, shortly before the official opening of Documenta 14 in Kassel, we thought that it would be meaningful to bring the Parliament into this city and to arrange it in a very different setting and using a very different kind of iconography, let's say, and architecture in order to build the kind of situation in which the Parliament can unfold. So as you see, we have used, the architect proposed to use the camouflage patterns which are taken from the military, and I think Paul will explain you later in more detail where exactly these blocks are coming from and what is their kind of iconographic reference, and what kind of military device is hidden here in this dispersed, in its dispersed presence all over the room. So this is a change of function of something that originally is supposed to be a killing machine into something that is supposed to become a machine for producing relationships. And this is what we are hoping to achieve here. Maybe at this point I will give the floor to Paul Preciado, curator of public programs of Documenta 14, to introduce to you the kind of political idea behind initiating a parliament as part of Documenta 14, or of using Documenta as a launching platform for something like a parliament, and also to introduce you in more detail to the program of the upcoming 3 days. Thank you very much for your attention, and I wish you successful proceedings today.
Hello, everyone. Well, I have to say that I'm very excited and very touched to see all of you here, because we've been working within this space during the last days, and just like trying to imagine who will come and if someone will come to this meeting. So now that you are all here, it really feels like, yes, this is real. So welcome you to the Parliament of Bodies. Kalos ήρθατε στην Βουλή των Σωμάτων for the Greek friends that are here today. And I will, in the following months, I will learn how to say this in German as well. Because don't think that I'm fluent enough in basically in Greek either. So it will be coming with the time. The idea of the Parliament of Bodies, the idea of transforming the public program of an exhibition like Documenta 14 into a Parliament of Bodies came from the experience to which we were forced to engage, basically, thanks to Adam Simchik's idea of give us a main theme of this exhibition, learning from Athens, and basically ask some of us from the team to move to Athens to start the research for this exhibition. So the founding experience from which this parliament became real was living through the long summer of migration of 2015 in Athens, but also I can say in many other places of Europe, also in Germany as well. Most particularly during the month of July of 2015, when the Greek government was celebrating the elections, asking the Greek people if they accepted the bailout proposal of the European community. The referendum, yes, exactly, that was a referendum. And as you know, what happened during that referendum is that a majority of the Greek people voted no, όχι, right? We all remember this όχι referendum. At the same time, thousands of hundreds of migrants and refugees were arriving to Greece, both coming from Turkey, of course, like in a long exile from Syria, but also trying to get to other places in Europe. What we saw during those days of July 2015 was clearly the impossibility of so-called democratic institutions to be able to represent the people. Somehow both the hundreds of thousands of undocumented migrants, as well as the people that suddenly were on the streets of Athens, basically contesting the reaction of the Greek government those days. It became clear to us at that point that traditional democratic institutions of representation were in crisis, right? That the Greek parliament, that as you know is located in Syntagma Square, was somehow crumbling, was in ruins, unable to represent either not just the Greek people, but also the hundreds of thousands of migrants and refugees arriving in Athens and in Greece those days. So from this crisis of representation and democratic institutions, of course, everyone was speaking at that point about both the economic crisis or the refugee crisis. But the main crisis was a crisis of democratic institutions. So it became urgent to us to say, okay, the parliament is not any longer within these architectures in which it's supposed to be. On one side, let's say, the parliament at Syntagma Square, but also the museums. The museums that are places in which, on one side, history is being written, and on the other side, political imagination is collectively constructed. So we wanted to reclaim these institutions, but sometimes also within the institutions themselves. As we are here today in a place that was already a parliament once, and that has became a library for a certain time, and then later a museum, and that today I think we have to reclaim as a parliament of parties. We have seen, and this is something that we've been speaking a lot about with the curatorial team, with Adam Simchik as well, I think that making an exhibition that is lasting for 5 years in the research process, I don't know if any of the previous teams was confronted to so many changes as we've been confronted this time. I mean, we've seen so many things in these years of preparation of the exhibition that we couldn't believe it. It was basically, we went from seeing, of course, the catastrophe, the ongoing war in Syria, but of course we also saw the Brexit, what to say. We also saw Trump coming to power. So we're seeing now Marine Le Pen from the extreme right being the candidate for the coming elections in France. I mean, and I'm sure that from many different backgrounds and places, I'm sure that you can come with examples of an ongoing transformation of the political ground on which we are standing. And we had the impression that we needed to act, that it was time for us to act before things became or will become impossible. Of course, the feeling as well was that some kind of big transformation had started within the West, and then we will question these notions of East, West, South, and North. But let's say that some big transformation was happening after the Second World War and after the 50s, after the Bandung Conference, and somehow at the same time that Documenta started and became an exhibition, with the process of decolonization of the South, with the process as well of becoming political subjects of a series of people that had been the object of repressive and necropolitical technologies of death. I'm talking about minorities in a large sense, but also, I mean, as you know, minority is not a question of number, but is a question of political oppression. So therefore, for instance, women are a minority, even though they're like the 51% of the population, right? So what we see during these years after the 50s was this long struggle from the countries that had been colonized and from the minorities within, let's say, the West, to kind of a challenge white masculine hegemony. And somehow we could say that we're going now through a process of counter-reform. Something is happening. There is like a global reaction against these struggles that started like a long time ago. So we had the impression that we needed to call for a new parliament of bodies, a parliament that, as you will see, brings at the center of the parliament the methodology of art, that art has to become one of the ways in which we imagine together the future. And this parliament is based in contesting the traditional division between theory and practice, arts and politics, but also arts and criticism, right? This is why we're all mixed up together, and this is why, for the confusion of the communication department and the media and everyone, you won't see the speaker or the performer or the artist with something that follows saying this is going to be a talk, or this is a conference, or this is a performance. Because precisely we're challenging the traditional ways in which we listen to things. So what we're trying to create here, and it's something that I cannot, as a curator, I cannot create. We can only do this collectively, right? And the idea is to modify the conditions in which a voice can be heard. Because many things are said constantly, but we became unable to listen to them. Right? So the exercise for us these days will be learning or unlearning the way we used to listen and learning other ways of listening as well. I just want to say, I don't want to go for a long time because we also have many other participants of the Parliament of Bodies. I just want to say a few things about the blocks on which you're sitting down right now. As Adam was saying, these blocks are the work of Andreas Angelidakis, who's a Greek artist and architect. And when we started working on the proposal of bringing seats into this rotunda that was before a parliament at some point, we started to work as well on the history of Kassel, on the economy of Kassel. And we realized that, of course, like one of the main industries in Kassel is the technology industry, but also the technology related to the war industry and weapons. And so basically, in a kind of a invisible way, the blocks that you have behind you or under you can be reassembled and transformed into a tank. What Andreas Angelidakis has done is taken the model of the main tank that is being produced here in Kassel and has disassembled this tank, and therefore each of you is sitting on one of these pieces that when they are put together they become a tank. I have to say that, yeah, a model of a tank for sure. I mean, this is something. I mean, one of the proposals that we had is that was how to radically contest war politics, war being the only technology for making politics or the only technology of government. So in a way, we have to live with this tension and we have to live with this contradiction, there are many contradictions on which documenta is sitting down, and this is one of the contradictions. And we have to do something with it collectively. And I'll just say one thing more briefly, and then if you have more questions, we can discuss later, both related to the Andreas Angelidakis work or to any other thing of the Parliament of Bodies. But I'd just like to say one thing is that the Parliament of Bodies, as Adam was saying, started being constructed in Athens 8 months ago. And we started constructing small different societies. We call them open form societies, thinking about Oscar Hansen's notion of the open form, that are inspired by the 18th century societies of France that started to fight slavery in a condition in which slavery was not possible. I mean, the abolition of slavery, was not even possible to be imagined. So this group of people decided not to fight with weapons, but to fight creating what I would consider the best public program that you can ever do, basically. They decided to go out to the streets, to meet with friends, to do theater, to write text, to talk to different people in a moment in which what they were proposing was impossible to imagine. I think that this is exactly the condition in which this Parliament of Bodies is starting. We need to imagine the impossible, because what is becoming possible now everywhere else is going to be basically the end of the world that we know. So I think that in order to be able to imagine the impossible is precisely necessary for all of us to start creating connections and relationships between the artists, the critics, the activists, and like avoiding these traditional segmentations. And that's why precisely today you will have sometimes the artists, sometimes the performers, sometimes the musicians, sometimes the sociologists or the historians or the critics speaking up and telling you a story. Right? And thank you to all of you.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Adam, for inviting me, for giving me the opportunity to open the Parliament of the bodies. My name is Boris Buden. I come originally from Croatia, or former Yugoslavia, so you see already it's a problematic. It is in itself of certain collapse.